When a company disappears, what's left behind? One day they were building the machines that powered American farms. The next, their jobs and their trust were gone without warning. No apology, no explanation, just silence. This isn't just about offshoring, it's about betrayal, broken communities, and a quiet revolution now taking root in the heartland. A sudden blow when the ground shook without warning. There are corporate shifts, and then there are seismic jolts that leave entire regions reeling. That's exactly what happened when KIH, a long-standing titan in the agricultural machinery world, abruptly shuttered its manufacturing plants across the United States, opting to relocate its production to Brazil, Germany, and India. The decision came without the courtesy of a warning, an internal discussion, or even a gradual phase-out. Instead, it arrived as a stark, impersonal company memo that felt more like a final verdict than a business update. The consequences weren't just economic, they were existential. Thousands of skilled American workers, many of whom had dedicated decades to KIH and took pride in building the very machines that helped feed the world, found themselves unemployed overnight. In communities where the company had long been the economic heartbeat, the shutdown didn't just kill jobs, it gutted identity, trust, and stability. This wasn't your typical corporate restructuring or downsizing. Analysts have referred to it as a corporate earthquake, and not without reason. Like the aftershocks of a literal quake, the effects didn't stop at the factory gates. They rippled outward, shaking small-town economies, fracturing social safety nets, and straining local governance. Entire ecosystems built around these factories, supply vendors, logistics firms, local diners, auto shops, even daycare centers, suddenly faced a future as uncertain as the employees who once walked through KIH's doors each morning. What makes this more jarring is the context in which it unfolded. At a time when U.S. policymakers were pushing for industrial revitalization and reshoring manufacturing jobs, KIH was sailing in the opposite direction, citing global efficiency and cost optimization. But this rationale rings hollow in the ears of those left behind, especially when no opportunity was offered to restructure operations domestically or explore community-based alternatives. To many, it felt like betrayal, not just of a workforce, but of a social contract. And while corporate offshoring isn't a new phenomenon, the sheer speed, silence, and scale of KIH's exit turned what might have been a calculated strategy into what now resembles a corporate vanishing act. In an era when economic resilience depends increasingly on transparency and community investment, KIH's decision may be remembered less for its financial implications and more for its human cost. A chilling reminder that even century-old institutions can disappear in a flash, leaving nothing behind but headlines, heartbreak, and hard questions. The immediate fallout: lost jobs, shattered trust. In towns like Rhine and Fargo, where generations of families built their livelihoods under the banner of KYH, the shock of abandonment cut deeper than just unemployment. These weren't merely workers, they were craftsmen, welders, mechanics, and machinists whose pride was forged in the fire of daily labor. The red tractors they assembled weren't just products, they were symbols of legacy and community pride. So when KIH pulled the plug, that pride gave way to something much darker, a collective sense of betrayal. The emotional toll was swift, but the practical impact was even harsher. For farmers gearing up for planting season, the timing couldn't have been worse. Machinery breakdowns are part of rural life, but what happens when there are no spare parts to be found? With supply chains snarled and components stuck overseas, tractors sat idle in barns, and the narrow windows for seeding and harvesting became dangerously tight. This wasn't just a temporary glitch in logistics, it was a systemic breakdown, exposing how fragile American agriculture has become when so much of it depends on parts that are now floating in cargo containers halfway across the globe. According to recent reports from the National Farmers Union, Up to 68% of small to mid-sized farms say they've experienced significant machinery-related delays since KIH's shift abroad. That's not just inconvenient, it's economically devastating. Meanwhile, the silence in once thriving towns has become deafening. Factories that once echoed with the clang of metal and the hum of machinery now sit dormant, ghostly shells of industry. Local diners, once packed during lunch shifts, are now empty. Gas stations see fewer trucks. Schools are seeing enrollment plummet as families relocate in search of work. Even Little League teams are folding, their uniforms and equipment no longer funded by what used to be the town's economic engine. The damage isn't contained to the economy, it's cultural, it's psychological. These towns were built on a rhythm: shift changes, school bells, Friday night games, Sunday church. And now that rhythm has been broken. And when you remove a company like KIH from the equation, you don't just eliminate a paycheck. You disrupt an entire ecosystem. Perhaps what stings the most is the erosion of trust. For decades, workers and farmers alike believed KIH was in it for the long haul, that through boom and bust, the company stood with them. But with a single announcement, that illusion was shattered. Loyalty, it turns out, was a one-way street. In today's volatile economic climate, where rural America is already fighting an uphill battle against urban migration, digital divides, and shrinking investment, the sudden withdrawal of an anchor institution like KIH has left communities not just bruised, but fundamentally destabilized. It raises painful questions. What happens when stability vanishes overnight? Who will fill the vacuum left behind? For now, there are more questions than answers. What's clear, though, is that the consequences of KIH's departure won't fade anytime soon. And in the towns it left behind, what was once a source of dignity is now a scar. A reminder that even the most dependable legacies can be torn away in a heartbeat. A matter of loyalty, when trust turns to betrayal. If there's one thing that stung more than the layoffs themselves, it was what came immediately afterward. A flurry of job listings posted by KIH, not in the American towns they had just abandoned, but in factories overseas. Skilled welders, mechanical engineers, technicians, the same kinds of jobs that had just been erased in the Midwest, were now being offered in Brazil, Germany, and India. For the American workforce left behind, this wasn't just bad optics. It was an insult dressed as opportunity, like being dumped and then asked to help your ex move in with someone new. The emotional fallout was immense. What many workers experienced wasn't just professional displacement, it was a profound sense of personal betrayal. For decades, employees had treated KIH not as a faceless corporation, but as a community pillar, showing up through recessions, harsh winters, and family milestones. Many families had 3, even 4 generations working the same production lines. Their identity was tightly woven into the fabric of the brand. And then, in one silent maneuver, that bond was broken. Sociologists often speak of place-based identity, the emotional attachment individuals feel to local institutions that have shaped their lives. KIH wasn't just an employer. It was a constant in the social contract of rural America. When a company exits without consultation, without accountability, it doesn't just sever employment. It fractures that very identity, leaving people questioning not only their future, but also their past loyalty. More than ever, people are asking, what is the value of corporate loyalty in a globalized economy? Is it a quaint relic from another time? Or is it still a vital thread in the fabric of healthy communities? In the case of KIH, the answer seems painfully clear. As workers watched help-wanted signs go up in São Paulo and Bangalore, they weren't thinking about global strategy. They were thinking about the kids they still needed to feed, the mortgage they couldn't pay, and the company they believed would never abandon them. This isn't just about economics. It's about moral clarity, or the lack thereof. When a company rises to global prominence on the backs of domestic workers and then pivots without warning, it calls into question the integrity of its leadership. It feeds a narrative that's all too familiar in post-industrial towns across America, that no matter how hard you work or how loyal you are, corporate interest will always chase cheaper margins, even if it means burning bridges to get there. And in the age of social media and decentralized storytelling, the damage to KIH's brand isn't confined to legal documents or business news headlines. It lives in Facebook posts from former employees, in GoFundMe campaigns for laid-off workers, and in TikToks from teenagers watching their parents grapple with unemployment. It's viral, it's raw, and it's real. The KIH episode has become more than a case of outsourcing. It's now a cautionary tale, a parable of how easily trust can be broken when values take a backseat to short-term profits. And for many, no glossy ad campaign or corporate rebranding will be enough to undo that damage. A supply chain in ruins when a brand abandons its backbone. The ripple effects of KIH's withdrawal weren't confined to pink slips or shuttered plants. What followed was a logistical meltdown that sent shockwaves through the heart of American agriculture. With repair parts no longer stocked domestically and international shipments delayed by weeks or months, farmers were left stranded. Tractors that once symbolized reliability now sat broken in barns, awaiting components that were either stuck at sea, back-ordered indefinitely, or blocked at customs. Faced with no other options, some farmers turned to ingenuity born of desperation. In places like rural Minnesota and Iowa, mechanics began scavenging parts from retired machines, while others dabbled in 3D printing makeshift components, hoping their farm-fabricated fixes would hold through harvest. It felt less like 21st century farming and more like a post-apocalyptic scramble for survival, where resourcefulness replaced supply chains and hope substituted for warranty support. And it wasn't just the end users bearing the brunt. KIH dealerships across the country were blindsided. With their shelves barren and service bays eerily quiet, longtime technicians stood idle while angry customers demanded answers. Service contracts were rendered meaningless, and warranty claims piled up in unopened email inboxes, leaving farmers to foot bills that had once been KIH's responsibility. Even more troubling was KIH's reaction to the growing aftermarket response. Instead of collaborating with third-party suppliers to fill the critical gaps in service, the company's legal department went on the offensive, sending out cease and desist letters to small businesses producing compatible parts. This move not only alienated independent mechanics and supply shops, but also deepened the public's sense that KIH cared more about protecting its patents than protecting its people. In normal times, a robust agricultural machinery network runs on precision, timing, and trust. Missed repair windows can translate into missed planting or harvest opportunities, economic disasters for small farms living season to season. Yet, in the wake of KIH's departure, the entire system began to fray. Supply delays turned minor mechanical issues into crop-threatening catastrophes, with some farms reporting yield losses due to machinery downtime. Data from the American Farm Bureau suggests that more than 40% of farms affected by KIH's exit experienced critical equipment disruptions, forcing them to lease or buy from competitors, often at inflated prices. Others had no choice but to scale back production, laying off seasonal labor or skipping planting entirely. It's hard to overstate the sense of abandonment. For decades, KIH's promise to farmers was simple: we'll be there when you need us. But now, the silence on the other end of the service line speaks volumes. And when a company leaves its most loyal customers without tools, parts, or even basic communication, the message is clear. Your trust was never part of the business model. In the chaos that followed, smaller, more agile competitors gained a foothold, offering not only the physical parts but the emotional reassurance KIH had once provided. What was once an industry dominated by legacy has now become an open field for innovation, where community-focused brands are stepping in to rebuild what KIH abandoned. Competitors seized the moment. As KIH stumbled, rival manufacturers like John Deere and Kubota wasted no time stepping into the void. They launched aggressive promotional campaigns, offering deep discounts, free merchandise at trade shows, and personal on-the-ground engagement with farmers. These weren't just marketing ploys, they were strategic moves to erode decades of brand loyalty built by KIH. Adding to the shift, used KIH machines began flooding the market at bargain prices, signaling not just a liquidation of assets, but a symbolic collapse of trust. What once represented generational loyalty, a brand passed down like a family legacy, was now being traded away for practical advantages. In rural communities where reputation travels fast, even longtime KIH supporters began turning elsewhere. The emotional connection, painstakingly built over years, unraveled in just a matter of months. This isn't just a story of market dynamics. It's a cautionary tale about how quickly customer trust can vanish when a brand fails to stand firm during crisis. A chilling silence from the top. As entire towns grappled with economic collapse, KIH's leadership remained notably distant, offering only cold, corporate jargon like global optimization in their rare public statements. There was no apology, no town hall, no effort to face the communities devastated by their decisions. This sterile response was met with outrage, not just for its lack of empathy, but for its dehumanizing tone in the face of real human suffering. The most affected were middle-aged workers, too old to easily retrain or relocate, yet too young to retire. Many had spent decades at the company, believing in its promise of long-term stability. Now they found themselves in limbo, watching their livelihoods evaporate with no safety net in sight. Legal battles quickly erupted. Former employees, local leaders, and even regional governments accused KIH of orchestrating a calculated withdrawal long before the public announcement, arguing that the closure was not a necessity but a concealed strategy. Allegations of betrayal and deception piled up in court documents, further fueling a sense of abandonment among the communities once proud to support the brand. The damage wasn't just financial, it was emotional, generational, and profoundly personal. And at the heart of it all was a leadership team that, in the eyes of many, chose silence over responsibility. The next generation turns away. As the fallout from KIH's collapse deepened, a quiet yet powerful shift began to emerge across farming communities. The next generation no longer wanted anything to do with the brand. Vocational schools, once proud partners in training skilled technicians for KIH machinery, started pulling their KIH-focused curricula. The once coveted company scholarships disappeared without a word, leaving students and instructors alike to question the future they had been preparing for. In farming households where KIH equipment had been a symbol of legacy, trusted and passed down like heirlooms, parents began steering their children in a different direction. The red-colored machines, once synonymous with strength and innovation, had become tainted by disillusionment and distrust. For many, KIH no longer represented opportunity. It now stood as a warning of corporate betrayal. This generational break is more than symbolic. It signals the erosion of a brand's cultural and emotional capital. Where KIH was once woven into the very fabric of agricultural life, its absence is now being actively chosen by the young. In a world where reputation travels faster than marketing, the damage done isn't just to market share, it's to memory, identity, and generational continuity. And when a brand loses the trust of those born into its legacy, rebuilding is no longer a matter of strategy. It becomes a battle against time and collective memory. This was never just about machines. At its core, the crisis surrounding KIH isn't simply about tractors or profit margins, it's about values. What's unraveling is far more human, a sense of dignity, shared identity, and generational loyalty that once connected communities to a brand they trusted. The outrage isn't rooted solely in economic hardship, but in the feeling of betrayal, of being discarded without a voice after years of unwavering support. Many longtime customers and workers still hold on to the belief that KIH could have charted a different course. If only the company had listened, really listened, to the voices on the ground and reinvested in the places that built its legacy, perhaps it could have repaired the breach. But silence speaks loudly, and the damage isn't just structural, it's emotional. Scars run deep when trust is broken at a community level, especially in rural America, where relationships are personal and loyalty is earned over decades. Amid this void, a new wave of hope is emerging. Not from industry giants, but from nimble, community-driven startups. These small agricultural tech firms are taking a radically different approach, designing tools that put farmers first, offering customer service rooted in empathy, and building business models that value transparency and fairness. This shift marks more than just an economic correction, it's a cultural one. As these startups grow, they represent not just innovation, but a quiet rebellion against corporate detachment. They are planting seeds of a future where rural resilience is no longer taken for granted, and where the soul of American farming is reclaimed, not with slogans, but with action. When a company turns its back on the very people who built it, what does that say about the future of work, of loyalty, of community? As new players rise from the ruins, one question remains. Can we rebuild something stronger, not just in machines, but in values? What do you think it takes to truly earn back trust once it's been broken?